Welcome to Spiritual Foundations for Life. This is day number 340. Our emotions are like the warning indicator on the dash of our car. If the light comes on, it's kind of irritating. And so we can respond generally in three different ways. First, we can put a band-aid over the light, and that's called suppression. Second, we can take a hammer and smash that light so it never lights again, and that's called indiscriminate expression. And third, we can look under the hood and discover the problem, and that's called acknowledgement. So when the light comes on, we don't deny that there is a problem. Instead, we discover what the problem is, and we fix it as soon as possible so we will avoid paying for a new engine. Now, it would be really great if we never felt depressed or anxious or angry, but those things are important feedbacks to us in our lives. They're kind of like the indicator light coming on in our car. Well, let's talk about the three ways we respond. Number one, suppression. There's two problems with suppression. First, it is simply dishonest, and second, it's really unhealthy. See, many of our psychosomatic illnesses have their basis in suppression. David said in Psalm 32 verse 3, when I kept silent, my bones wasted away through my groaning all day long. There is, that is a great description of the effects of a psychosomatic illness. In Psalm 32 verse 5, David said, then I acknowledged my sin to you and did not cover up my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave the guilt of my sin. See, when David acknowledged his sin rather than covering it up, that's when he got free. So David gave us wise counsel in the very next verse, Psalm 32 verse 6. Therefore let everyone who is godly pray to you while he may be found. Surely the mighty waters rise, they will not reach him. See, it's not that God isn't findable. It's just that when we just step over the line, we cross a line emotionally, and we just lose it, and we stop thinking rationally. And so to suppress or deny our emotions is actually very dangerous for our lives. We may actually get out of connection with God and with truth. The other reason that suppressing our emotions is bad is that it's dishonest. Proverbs chapter 10 verse 18, he who conceals his hatred has lying lips. In the process of communication, about 7 or 8% of our communication is verbal. That means the other 92 to 93% is nonverbal. About 35% is behavioral, and about 55% is attitudinal. So when our verbals and our nonverbals don't match, people will immediately believe the nonverbal. People know that something is wrong, not from our verbals, but from our nonverbals. Now, verbal communication is important. The Bible tells us we need to speak the truth in love. But if our nonverbals are saying something different, but people don't know what's wrong, they will guess. And chances are they're going to guess wrong. And that presumption can cause a lot of strife in our relationships. And that's why we have so many conflicts in our families, because we're forced to make assumptions about our nonverbals because we are not communicating the truth with our verbals. So suppression is dishonest and it is very unhealthy. Well, let's look at indiscriminate expression. Well, it's very unhealthy for the other person when you lash out at them. Maybe you got it off your chest and you feel better, but you shot it at the other person's chest and you wounded them. The Apostle James speaks to this issue. He said in James chapter 1 verses 19 and 20, my dear brothers, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, for man's anger does not bring about the righteous life that God desires. So yeah, let's avoid doing it that way. Number 3, let's talk about acknowledgement. Acknowledgement is what we should be all aiming at. We get to the point and we just speak the truth in love. We tell people honestly where we are at. And we start by being honest to God. We cannot be right with God I'm sorry, we cannot be, I'm sorry, yeah, we cannot be right with God if we're not going to be real with God. Okay? And if necessary, God may have to make us real in order to get us to be right with Him. He may have to humble us so that we will begin to be real. You see, this is what real relationship with God looks like, where we can pour out our heart to God without any sense of embarrassment or shame. See, if we can get to that place where we can pour out our soul to God, then we won't have to live it out towards others. Do we understand that there is nothing that we cannot talk to God about? Because He already knows it anyway. And so, since we are already forgiven by God, well, then let's be honest with Him. Let's be real with God. You know, Job was going through some horrible suffering and depression, and three friends came to Job and they sat with him for a week and just listened, which was a good thing. But then after a while, they got impatient and they started to point out to him all of his problems. And when they were done, Job replied in Job chapter 6, verse 25, "How painful are honest words! But what do your arguments prove? Do you mean to correct what I say and treat the words of a despairing man as just wind?" See, when someone is hurting, we're all tempted to respond to the hurting person's negative words. Instead, what we should be doing is respond to their pain, respond to what they're feeling by empathizing with them. The Bible says we need to weep with those who weep, and not to instruct them or counsel them or scold them. Just weep with them. Just be there with them. Our key point today is our emotions are like warning lights that warn us when there is something wrong with our thoughts. And our key verse, Proverbs chapter 10, verse 18, "He who conceals his hatred has lying lips." God bless you. See you tomorrow for another episode of Spiritual Foundations for Life.